CachyOS is regarded as one of the best Arch distributions out there. But is there any alternative to it that is a bit more beginner friendly? In this video I will have a look at Garuda, an Arch distribution that tries to make Arch Linux accessible to everyone out there. I will focus mostly on gaming and see if there is a performance gap between the two distributions and Windows 11 using a Nvidia GPU, in this case the 5090 Founders Edition. After the gaming comparisons, I will share my opinion on which I find it easier to use and more beginner friendly, so stay tuned. Both distros were up to date at the time of testing. I followed the documentation on how to set Steam for gaming on CachyOS. I did the same for Garuda, where I set the Steam launch options. On the screen now you can see the kernel version and the video drivers for CachyOS. And here is the kernel and video drivers for Garuda. When it comes to Garuda, I use the Zen version 5 kernel, not the default one. On CachyOS, I use the translation layer provided by CachyOS developers, while on Garuda I use Proton GE. Windows 11 was updated to 25H2 and I use the latest Nvidia GPU drivers. When it comes to the side-by-side runs, I will show only the settings at 1440p, as I use the exact settings for 4K as well. Now let's move to the side-by-side comparison. First, I will start with Ratchet & Clank. I tested this game only with ray tracing enabled, and at 1440p, Garuda and CachyOS were basically tied, with Windows 11 delivering a big win amounting to around 28% more average performance over both Arch Linux distributions. When I increased the resolution to 4K, keeping the same settings, Windows still commands a 26% performance advantage over both Linux distributions. Stellar Blade is a game that doesn't use ray tracing, and in this one, CachyOS performed better when opposed to Garuda, but trailed Windows yet again. At 4K, the gap between CachyOS and Garuda increases from around 6% at 1440p to 10% more performance in favor of the former. Either way, Windows still commands a 10% performance lead over both Linux distributions. Counter-Strike 2 was tested using these competitive settings, and here Garuda trails Windows 11 while delivering 4% more performance when compared to CachyOS. Counter-Strike 2 runs native in Linux, so have that in mind. Borderlands 4 is an Unreal Engine 5 game that was released not long ago. Using maximum settings on both Linux distributions, there are some minor visual artifacts, while in Windows 11, all good. Either way, at 1440p, Garuda is on par with CachyOS, but both deliver around 32% less performance when compared to Windows 11. The gap between CachyOS and Windows 11 shrinks to almost 25% in favor of Windows, while Garuda trails CachyOS by around 2%. I tested the alters only at 4K in order to replace Counter-Strike 2. And here CachyOS is ahead of Garuda, delivering on average 5% more performance, while it trails Windows by around 25%. And this is the 1440p chart. Keep in mind that only two games are using ray tracing, Ratchet & Clank and Indiana Jones. In fact, Indiana Jones is using path tracing in my test run. As we can see, Windows 11 delivers clear victories in most games but two: Indiana Jones and Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, while Indiana Jones is using a Vulkan API instead of DirectX 12, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 seems to be well optimized, as there is less variation when changing operating systems. And here we can see the performance gap in percentage. The values displayed are for the average performance difference in percentage compared to CachyOS. As we can see, Windows never lost in a game, while Garuda had less victories against CachyOS. Either way, at 1440p, on average, Windows delivers 17% more performance when compared to CachyOS, while Garuda lost by 1% to the other Arch distribution. And now the 4K chart. Windows is the clear winner, while Garuda only manages to be on par with CachyOS and Ratchet & Clank with ray tracing enabled. In most games, the performance difference between the two Arch-based distributions can be attributed to margin of error, as it can be seen in this graph. Against Garuda, CachyOS had clearer victories at this resolution than at 1440p. Regardless, on average, Windows 11 still leads CachyOS by 70%, while Garuda loses by around 3% to CachyOS. Now, which distro I would choose? To be honest, it's a tough decision, but if you are a newbie and you want to give Linux a try, between these two distributions I would choose Garuda over CachyOS. Hear me out why. Once installed, I find Garuda a bit more beginner friendly. This is because of Garuda Rani, the app that helps you install a lot of things on Garuda. It has a better graphical user interface that is easier to navigate. With it, you can choose which kernel to install. You can actually use the CachyOS kernel, a task that would be daunting if using the terminal for new users. Garuda makes switching kernels quite straightforward through the app. I find the user interface better than CachyOS Hello. This approach is going to be familiar for people migrating from Windows that are not tech-savvy. I find Garuda, with its graphical user interface for installing apps and configuring the operating system, the most beginner-friendly Arch distributions, at least from the ones that I tried. With that said, it's good to learn to use a bit the terminal and to search on the internet for solutions if issues may arise. I see this as a step in the right direction. You still need to know what to install, how to set the translation layer in Steam, but using the app to install applications that you are familiar in Windows is a lot easier than searching the AUR packages and installing those through the terminal. Don't get me wrong, CachyOS is an amazing distribution with a really good wiki page that is well tuned and seems to perform a bit better, but the performance gap is minimal. I would argue that it has a minor learning curve disadvantage when compared to Garuda. Now, when it comes to gaming, Windows 11 still reigns supreme when using Nvidia GPUs. Games are made for Windows, and Nvidia has acknowledged the fact that it is aware of the performance degradation in DirectX games on Linux. Now, I'm not sure how focused is Nvidia in fixing this issue, but fingers crossed. For frame chasers, Linux is not the best option. For people playing mostly online games, Linux again is not the best option. Also, a few new games may exhibit graphical glitches, and some time may pass until these are attended, as Proton updates are not released daily. This last issue mentioned, I don't find it that concerning, as most games nowadays are released to the public in beta state, with fixes applied over the following months. I think that it's best to avoid buying games on release day. Keep in mind that now most single-player games will work on Linux, but there can always be one that will not work properly or at all, as developers don't tweak for Linux. And that's it for this video. If you liked the video or found it useful, hit the thumbs up button and consider subscribing to the channel. Take care, and I hope to see you all in the next one.